Hi everyone, and welcome to Hontora. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. This is the place where we explore the darkest, most deeply unsettling true horror stories the internet has to offer. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Genuinely glad you're here. I need you to stay with me tonight. Not as a request, as a warning. Because what I'm about to share with you is the kind of thing that doesn't clock out when the video ends. It follows you into the quiet, into the dark behind your eyelids, into that half second before sleep pulls you under. I've been doing this long enough to know the difference between a story that scares you and a story that changes something. Tonight is the second kind. Links are at the top of the description. Go find them after. Don't leave yet. 2 stories. I've been holding on to them longer than I've held on to anything on this channel. Not because I wasn't ready to post, yet because I wasn't sure you'd be ready to hear them. I still don't know if you are, but I think that's exactly why we have to go there. The first one will get under your skin. The second one, and I am choosing my words carefully here, the second one will still be sitting in the back of your mind 3 days from now. I can almost guarantee it. I know, because it's still sitting in mine. When it's over, don't just close the tab. Come to the comments. Tell me what it did to you, because I think some of you are going to need to talk about it. Lights down, door closed. Let's go. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. I'm a historian, not the academic kind with a university office and a 10-year track. The kind who drives 4 hours on a Saturday because a 1934 federal survey mentioned a hollow that doesn't appear on any modern map. I work in land records and displacement history, specifically the forced removal of Appalachian communities during the national park expansion era. It's dry work on paper. In the field, it's something else entirely. I don't believe in haunted places. I want to be upfront about that. I believe in documented history, in primary sources, in what the paperwork says happened to real people in real places. The emotional weight of that history is significant. I'm not dismissing it. But there's a difference between a place that carries grief and a place that's haunted. I've always been clear on that distinction. I'm a little less clear on it now. This was late October 2 years back. I was following up on a research thread about a cluster of family settlements in the western ridge section of a Virginia mountain range. Settlements that were vacated by federal order in the mid-1930s when the land was absorbed into a new national park. Families who'd been there for generations. Some left willingly, most didn't. And the ones who didn't were eventually removed anyway. The structures were demolished. The orchards were left to go feral. And in some sections of the forest, particularly in the hollows, where the demolition crews apparently didn't bother to finish the job, the stone chimneys were still standing. Just the chimneys. No walls, no roofs, no floors. Just columns of stacked fieldstone rising out of the leaf litter, marking where a family's kitchen used to be. I'd found reference to one particular cluster in a 1936 resettlement office report. 6 structures in close proximity, 1 extended family, removed in the spring of that year. The report noted the demolition as incomplete due to terrain access. I wanted to photograph the remaining chimneys for a paper I was writing on material evidence of forced displacement. That was it. That was the whole reason I was there. I parked at a pull-off around 9 in the morning and went in on foot. No trail. The hollow wasn't maintained. Wasn't on any park map I could find. And the access was through about 1.5 miles of second-growth timber before the terrain started dropping toward the creek bottom where the settlement had been. The morning was cold, the way October mornings in the mountains are cold. Not brutal, but immediate, the kind that gets into your collar and stays there. The forest floor was deep in wet leaves, and the smell of them, that specific, dark composting smell of late-season leaf fall, was heavy in the air. I had my camera, my GPS unit, a thermos of coffee, and a printout of the 1936 survey coordinates. I found the first chimney around 10:30. It was exactly what I had expected from the documentation. Maybe 15 feet tall fieldstone construction, the firebox opening facing what would have been the interior of the structure. Moss on the north face. A young tulip poplar growing through the foundation footprint, maybe 30 years old. I photographed it from multiple angles, took GPS coordinates, made notes. Professional, routine. I felt the thing I always feel at these sites, which is a kind of quiet heaviness. Not supernatural, just historical. Real families, real displacement, real loss. I've learned to sit with that feeling rather than push past it. The second chimney was about 60 meters south. Same construction, similar condition. I documented it and moved on. It was between the second and third chimneys that I noticed the quiet. Not silence. The wind was moving through the upper canopy and there was a woodpecker working somewhere to the east. But the ambient forest noise, the small creature rustling in the leaves that you stop consciously registering after about an hour in the woods, had stopped. I noticed it the way you notice a refrigerator has turned off. The absence, not the thing itself. I stood still for a moment and listened. Wind, woodpecker, nothing else. Deer, I thought. Spooked something moving through. I kept walking. The third chimney was the tallest of the cluster and in better condition than the first two. The mortar was cracked, but the structure was intact, standing in a small clearing where the tree canopy opened up enough to let in a column of flat gray October light. I was setting up a wide shot when I became aware that I was being watched. Again, I want to be precise here, because I'm not someone who uses that phrase loosely. It wasn't a feeling exactly. It was more like a recalibration. The same low-level situational awareness that the human brain runs constantly in unfamiliar terrain had quietly updated its assessment of the environment. And the update was, something in this space has changed. I lowered the camera and looked around the clearing. Trees, leaf litter, the chimney, nothing else. I went back to shooting. I was there another 20 minutes before I saw the figure. It was at the tree line, maybe 30 meters north of the clearing, standing between two oaks, completely still. Dark clothing, brown or dark green, hard to tell in that light. I couldn't make out a face clearly at that distance, just the shape of a person, standing with their hands at their sides. My first thought, I want to be honest, was relief. Another hiker, that's all. Maybe a park employee doing trail work, although there was no trail. I raised a hand. The figure didn't move. I called out. Something neutral. Hey, you need anything? My voice came out steady. I was proud of that. Nothing, just standing. I looked down at my camera to check a setting, some small instinct telling me to break eye contact, normalize the moment. When I looked back up, the figure was maybe 10 meters closer, still at the tree line, still completely still. I hadn't heard movement. The leaves were ankle deep and wet, but not silent. I hadn't heard a single step. My mouth went dry. That's the accurate physical description. Not fear exactly, not yet. Just a very sudden and complete dryness in my mouth and a tightening across my shoulders that I recognized as my body doing something before my brain had caught up. I took a slow breath, thought it through. Bad angle on the distance. Optical illusion in this light. I misjudged the original position. I called out again. Hey, this is Parkland. Are you at the service? The figure turned its head, slowly, not toward me, away, like it was looking at something behind it and to the left. Then it stepped back into the trees. I stood in that clearing for a long time, long enough that the cold I'd stopped noticing started registering again, long enough that my coffee had gone from warm to room temperature. I watched the tree line. Nothing moved. I packed my camera. I want to be clear about what I did next because I think about it still. I didn't run. I made a decision, a real considered decision, to finish what I'd come to do. There were 3 more chimneys marked on the survey. I documented all 3. My hands were steady on the camera. My notes are legible. I was methodical because being methodical was the only thing I trusted at that point. I did not go back near the north tree line. I was out of the hollow by 2 p.m, hiked back to the car, drove to the nearest town, sat in a diner with a cup of coffee and my notebook, and wrote down everything I'd seen with as much precision as I could manage while it was fresh. The figure's approximate height, the clothing color, the distance, the movement I thought I'd seen. I filed an incident report with the Park Service, not because I thought it was an emergency, but because a person standing motionless in an unmaintained, off-trail section of backcountry in late October is objectively worth flagging. The ranger I spoke to was polite, asked standard questions, took my contact information. He called back a week later, said they'd sent someone in to check the area, found no evidence of a camp, no gear, nothing to indicate recent sustained presence. He did mention, almost as an aside, that the hollow I'd been in was one of the more historically sensitive sections of that park district, which see that the families removed from that specific location had contested the removal in federal court and lost, and that the case record was, in his words, pretty hard to read. He didn't elaborate. I didn't ask him to. I've been back to the documentary records since then. Found photographs of the family from the 1930 census, a formal portrait, the kind they took in those years, stiff and unsmiling. 6 adults and several children standing in front of a stone chimney. The chimney in the photograph looks like the tall one, the one in the clearing. I look at the photograph sometimes when I'm working late. One of the men in it is standing slightly apart from the others, hands at his sides, looking not at the camera but at something off to the left. I've told myself a dozen times that it's coincidence, composition, the way people stand. I almost mean it. I'm not a ghost hunter. I want to be clear about that before anything else. I'm a county records researcher, the unglamorous kind, the kind who spends 3 days in a basement archive cross-referencing land deeds from 1940 and considers it a productive week. My name isn't important. What matters is that I know how to read a document. I know what legal language looks like when it's trying to say something plainly, and I know what it looks like when it's trying not to. The Hollis sealing order was the second kind. I came across it by accident. I was pulling records for a client, a property developer doing due diligence on a parcel of land in the western part of the county, and buried inside a folder of routine zoning correspondence from 1931 was a court order unlike anything I'd seen in 15 years of this work. 2 pages, signed by a county judge, ordering the permanent sealing of a residential structure referred to only as the Hollis dwelling at a listed survey coordinate on the grounds of public health emergency and unresolved biological contamination. The order cited a diphtheria outbreak, an entire family, and then at the bottom, almost as a footnote, the sealing order carried no expiration. It was still technically in effect. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I want to be honest about it, because the honest version is the only one that makes any sense of what happened after. I drove out there. Not that day. It took me 2 more weeks of records work to triangulate the survey coordinates to an actual location, a process that involved 3 different county map editions and a conversation with an elderly land surveyor who told me he'd heard of the property and had never gone near it, and said this without any particular drama, just as a fact, the way you'd mention a road with a bad surface. I found it on a Tuesday in late October. Drove 2 hours into the mountains on a main road, then 40 minutes on a county road, then 15 minutes on a gravel track that the county hadn't maintained in what looked like several decades. The trees pressing in from both sides until the track ended at a rusted gate with a no trespassing sign so old the lettering had faded to ghost text. The cabin was about 100 yards past the gate through sparse second-growth timber. I could see the roof line from the gate, still standing. That was the first thing that surprised me. 90-plus years, and it was still structurally upright, which said something about how it had been built, or about how little weather reached it through that canopy. I told myself I was there professionally. I had a camera, a notepad, and a rationale. Photographic documentation of a legally sealed structure for a client file. That's what I told myself. Honestly, I think I was just curious in the specific way that records work makes you curious. You spend enough time reading about places and people and events that existed, and you want to see the physical thing that all that paper was pointing at. I climbed the gate, walked up to the cabin. The ceiling was visible immediately. The door and both windows on the front face had been boarded over, that thick planking, nailed in a cross pattern, the kind of job that someone did with the intention of it holding. The wood had darkened over the decades to the same gray-brown as the cabin walls, which made the whole structure look almost uniform, like it had absorbed the closure into itself. I walked the perimeter, took photos, checked my notes against what I was seeing. That's when I noticed the smell. Not strong, not immediately identifiable. Something underneath the expected smell of old wood and leaf rot and mountain air. Something that didn't belong to any of those categories. Sweet in a way that wasn't pleasant. Medical, almost. I stood on the north side of the cabin and breathed through my nose and tried to place it and couldn't, and told myself it was probably some kind of fungal growth inside the walls, which can produce complex organic compounds, which can smell like almost anything. That's what I told myself. I went back to the front of the cabin, and that's when I saw the boards on the door. 3 of the cross planks had been partially pulled away from the frame, not fallen. The nails were bent outward, which meant force had been applied from inside the door. The planks were still attached at one end each, hanging at angles, leaving a gap in the boarding maybe 18 inches wide and 2 feet tall. The door itself was still closed behind them, but the seal was broken. I stood there for a while looking at that. Boards don't pull away from frames from the inside due to weathering. Wood expands outward when it swells, which would push boards tighter against a frame, not pull them away. I ran through the physics of it and couldn't make it work any other way. Something had pushed those boards outward, from inside. The rational explanation, and I held on to this for longer than I should have, was that someone had broken in from outside and then replaced the boards poorly behind them. Teenagers, maybe? Urban explorers? People who do what I was doing, but with less paperwork justification. It was possible. The bent nails were harder to explain that way, but it was possible. I should have left. I didn't leave. The door wasn't locked. There'd been a padlock hasp installed at some point, but the lock itself was missing, and the door swung inward when I pushed it. The smell hit me immediately, stronger inside. Still that sweet medicinal quality, but layered now with something else, something damper, and my throat did something involuntary, a tightening that wasn't quite nausea but was adjacent to it. The interior was a single large room. Stone fireplace on the far wall, remnants of furniture, a table, 2 chairs, the collapsed remains of what had been a bed frame in the far corner. The floor was wide plank timber, thick with dust except for a path through the dust, clear as a line drawn with a ruler, running from the door to the fireplace and back. Not a single path, multiple passes back and forth. The dust compressed and disturbed in a strip maybe 2 feet wide. Recent. The dust on either side was uniformly thick and undisturbed. Whatever had made that path had made it after the last time any significant air movement had come through this space. I stood in the doorway and looked at that path for a long time. My heart was doing something I didn't have a clean explanation for, not racing, just elevated and staying there. That low, persistent thrum that your body produces when it's processing something your conscious mind hasn't finished categorizing yet. I was breathing through my mouth without having decided to. Then I heard it, from inside the fireplace. Not a sound with a clear source or a clear nature. The closest I can get is a weight shifting, a slow, deliberate redistribution of mass. The sound a person makes when they've been still for a long time and they move. Just once. Then nothing. I was outside before I'd consciously decided to move. That's not a metaphor. I have no memory of turning around or crossing the floor or going through the door. I was inside and then I was outside, and I was walking fast toward the gate, and the back of my neck was doing something I can only describe as loud. A full body awareness of the space behind me that was so intense it was almost a sound in itself. I did not run. I want to be clear about that. I walked fast, with my eyes forward, and I did not look back. Not because I was afraid of what I'd see, but because some functional part of my brain had decided that the most important variable right now was covering distance, and that anything which interrupted that was a cost I couldn't afford. I got to the gate, climbed it, got to my car, sat in the driver's seat for probably 4 minutes before I started the engine. I reported it, filed a formal notice with the county.pl anonymous from a payphone. Yes, those still exist if you know where to look. Describing a breach of the sealed structure and evidence of recent unauthorized entry. 2 weeks later, I checked the county maintenance log, which is public record, and found a single entry. Boards replaced, structure resecured, matter referred to county health office for review. No follow-up entry after that. The health office referral apparently went nowhere, or if it went somewhere, it didn't generate any public record I could find. I've thought a lot about the path through the dust, about the mechanics of it, how fresh it was, how deliberate it looked, how it ran between the door and the fireplace, as if whatever made it had been doing it regularly, habitually, the way you'd pace a room you'd been in for a long time. The sealing order from 1931 lists the names of the family members who died in the cabin. 5 names. The youngest was 4 years old. I've read that document many times since. I keep coming back to the language at the bottom, like at the part that explains why the court ordered sealing rather than demolition. It says, and I'm quoting from memory here, "Structure to be preserved in current state pending resolution of outstanding questions regarding the circumstances of death. 93 years later, nobody has resolved them. And whatever's wearing a path between that door and that fireplace doesn't seem to be waiting around for anyone to try.